Good evening. My name is Karl. I'm an alcoholic. It's a pleasure to be here. I'd like to thank Patrick for inviting me. I'd like to thank Alex for not objecting once I got here, our secretary. I'd like to thank Allison and Jacob for picking me up at the airport on time, which is a big deal. All right. I am from Covina, California, which is in Los Angeles County. And if anybody know where Covina is? Oh, really? A lot of times some people say, well, is it anywhere near West Covina? And we go, well, just a little east of there. Just a little east. But if you don't know where Covina is, but you do know where Los Angeles is, if you were, this gives you a little idea. If you are in downtown Los Angeles at 1 a.m. in the morning, and you point your car directly east, and you drive for about 22 minutes, you will hit Covina, if it's 1 in the morning. If it's 3 in the afternoon, 3.5 hours is what it will take you. And as I said, I'm from Covina, and my home group is cleverly called the Covina Group of Alcoholics Anonymous. The old-timers, I'm sure, took at least 5 business meetings to come up with that clever idea. And some people often ask, how long has the Covina Group been around? And I say, well, you're looking at it. It was formed in 1961, and I was born in 1961. And it's one of the reasons I feel so connected to that group. So, my sobriety date is January 21st, 1987. I would have a few more years of sobriety if I would have stopped when they told me to. But I'm like you guys, we keep drinking well past when the authorities tell you to stop. The most important thing I can tell you about myself is that I'm an alcoholic. It really is. Like, I care a lot about, there's a lot of things that I care about in this world. There are things that I got a lot of passion for, that I spend a lot of time paying attention to. But there is nothing more important than the fact that I'm an alcoholic. And the reason I believe I'm an alcoholic is really very simple. The reason I believe I'm an alcoholic is because I've got a really bizarre relationship with alcohol. That's why I'm an alcoholic, no other reason. And this strange relationship that I have with alcohol takes on a few forms. The first part of this strange relationship that I have with alcohol happens when I drink it. A very strange thing happens when I drink booze. Our book calls it an allergic reaction. And the book says the symptom of this allergic reaction that I get when I drink alcohol is what they refer to as something called the phenomenon of craving. And the best way that I can describe this thing that the book calls the phenomenon of craving in my life is that it seems like whenever I drink booze, the more booze I drink, the thirstier I get. It's really strange. It happens with absolutely nothing else that I drink. An example of that is they've been kind enough to give me this bottle of water up here. And over the next 55 minutes to 6 hours that I'm talking with you, I know, I love the nervous laugh. You didn't really mean that, really? No. Over the next 55 minutes that I'm talking with you, I will probably drink about half this bottle. I'll probably keep it and maybe finish it off later tonight. But I can absolutely guarantee you that once I finish this bottle of water, I am not going to go buy a case of water and lock myself in a motel room. There's no chance that I'll be texting Jacob later, dude, I need another case, man. Come on, I'll turn the paint flip of Joel's car over. Come on, right? It's not going to happen. But if that was the only thing that made me alcoholic, this bizarre physical reaction, this craving, they call it, this unquenchable thirst that happens once I start drinking, if that was the sum total of my relationship with alcohol, well then, just say no would have wiped out alcoholism, right? Early 80s, Nancy Reagan came out and said, just say no. If that would have worked, I would have, and I imagine you would have gone, oh, no, and just gone on and lived a happy, successful life, just saying no. But I've got this other really strange component to my relationship with alcohol. And what's really strange about this part of my relationship with alcohol is that this happens when I'm not drinking. If you're new, I really want to say that again loudly and clearly. This component of my relationship with alcohol happens when I'm not drinking. Our book calls this the mental obsession. They also refer to it as the strange mental blank spot. They even drive it further home when they call it the thought process that precedes the first drink. The best way that I can describe the mental obsession in my life is that it seems like no matter how much pain and suffering my last drunk caused, I seem to have a mind that will always paint a picture that makes it okay for me to take another drink. I seem to have a mind that will rationalize and justify my walk back to the next drink at all costs. So therefore, because of these two components of my relationship with alcohol. Number one, I cannot drink successfully because this strange craving, this unquenchable thirst that happens. So I can't drink successfully. But at the very same time, because of this thing called the mental obsession, I cannot not drink successfully. I'm damned if I do, and I'm damned if I don't. It's the ultimate catch-22 we call alcoholism. I swear to you, if I could do either one of those two things, either drink successfully or on my own not drink successfully, that's what I'd be doing. Dang it, I just lied. Patrick, in some of his text messages over the last couple of months, had said, hey, I hope you have a good time, but try not to lie. And I am 7 minutes into this, and I have lied. I just flat out lied to you. I just told you that I would drink successfully if I could. I used to think that I wanted to drink when I was new in my first year or so. I knew I couldn't drink successfully, but I thought if I could, I would. But I now know that was actually a lie, and it's a lie for me to say it now. And the reason that I thought that I would have drank successfully if I wanted to, see, I have no interest in drinking successfully now. The reason that I used to think that I wanted to is because I was ill-informed as to what successful drinking was. And the reason that I was ill-informed as to what successful drinking was is because I had never done it, right? But now, at 38 years of sobriety, I have read about it, and I have witnessed it in a number of people. And I'm here to report to you what I found out, and let's see if you're interested. Apparently, successful drinking entails drinking approximately 2 drinks and stopping. 2 drinks and stop. Right? This makes me nervous to think about that. Right? It makes me twitch. In fact, I would far rather all of you stand up and scream obscenities at me for the next hour. I'd rather that happen than for me to be caught in a situation where I have 2 drinks in me and I can't get any more. That is a nightmare scenario for me. I'm going to harp on that physical feature just a little bit more because it's the one thing, bar none, we all have in common. Because the fact is, there's a lot of things we don't have in common. But if you're new and you've heard us say, listen for the similarities rather than the differences, and you're struggling with that because the facts about your life seem to be a little bit different, I agree. The facts of people's lives in AA is very different. And the reason that is because AA is a huge, wide cross-section of society. Every single race, creed, color, and religion, every single social and economic background, every single culture is all represented right here in Alcoholics Anonymous. In fact, we are such a diverse crowd in AA that probably right here in this room we have a bank president, a bank teller, and a bank robber, all right here in this room right now. And on top of that, although even our backgrounds, the facts about our lives can be very, very different, on top of that, we drink differently than each other. We really do. We drink differently than each other. If you listen closely, when people tell their stories in meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous, I think you'll agree, we drink differently than each other. To illustrate that, let's imagine this. Let's imagine, I doubt the church would let us do this. In fact, I know they wouldn't. But just in case, imagine this. Right through those back doors, we wheeled in a giant cart right up to the front of this room, and on that cart we had all the kinds of booze we all love. Right? If you're a top shelf expensive drinker, we got it. Remy Bar, Cavassier, we got it. If you're a bottom shelf drinker, we got that too. Mad Dog 2020. I knew I liked that bird. There's always the guy that starts to salivate when you start talking about Mad Dog. Right? And everything in between, we got it all. And if we all took a good 4 or 5 stiff drinks, real drinks, no umbrellas in there, no mixer, good solid 4 or 5 drinks, we'd all be acting very, very differently. Right? Over in this corner, we'd have the good time crowd. Fun, woohoo, drink, party, drink, talk, party, talk, talk. If we add a little methamphetamine, we talk a little faster, talk. Right? Having a good time over here. Right? Good time corner. Over in that corner, we'd have the criers, you know them. Over in that corner, we'd have the fighters, get a little drunk, gotta fight. Over in this corner, a bunch of us would be naked. I personally would be visiting the other 3 corners, trying to find a couple of friends to come over here with me. That's kind of the way I did. So our stories are very different based upon which corner we're drinking in. Over in the good time corner, get arrested a lot. Out on the, gotta get to the next bar. It's always happening in the next bar, right? After hours, whose house are we going? Oh, man, we're heading over to Alice's house. Let's go, woo, right? Out on the road, we get arrested a lot. Over in the crying corner, they don't get arrested. They don't even leave the damn house. Worst thing they do, they call you at 3 a.m. So our stories are very different based upon which corner we're drinking. But no matter which corner we're drinking in, there's one thing we would all be doing. We'd all be back at that cart for another drink. That was really important for me to understand when I was new in Alcoholics Anonymous, when they said, listen for the similarities rather than the differences. Because if I listen to, how old are you? What kind of family you came from? Where'd you grow up? What culture are you? X, Y, I don't know. Am I going to identify? Maybe not. But if I listen to, what happens to you when you drink? And maybe even a little bit even more important, what happens to you when on your own you try not drinking? I can identify with anybody in Alcoholics Anonymous. I set this relationship up with alcohol that I just described to you. Right from the get-go when I first started drinking. I started drinking very late compared to most people in AA. I was 11. I hung in there. I wasn't drinking to escape. I was born in Helena, Montana at 4 years old. My father packed us all up, moved the whole family out to the island of Borneo in Southeast Asia. I was there till I was almost 10. The family came back to Seattle when I was almost 10. At 11, I took a drink. I was actually having a good time of life. And the reason I took a drink, my best friend Dave, one day said, my dad is having a big party next week. He's got a case of whiskey and a case of vodka found in the basement. We got to steal a bottle and try it. And I said, okay. That's it. That's all that happened. But once I got enough of that in me that time, my life changed on the spot. My reaction to alcohol, in looking back, was completely, it's like I almost, from that day forward, I was willing to sell my soul for another drink. Almost instantaneously, my life took a turn. By the time I'm 14, I'm the neighborhood drunk, I'm the neighborhood pot dealer. My hair, I just grew my hair long again. I haven't had it this long in a long, long time. So I can't say this to it. I grew my hair down to my shoulders. Well, it's there again. And my vocabulary all the way through my teenage years was, whoa. Wow. Hey, man. I call my mother man. Hey, man. And my parents, really good people, were like, what has happened, right? But they didn't understand I was alcoholic. So therefore, they blamed my problems that I was having on people, places, and things. If we can get him right back from that damn group of kids he's hanging out with, things will get better. If we can get him out of the damn public school system, get him into a private school, things get better. They tried all of the above, but you see, I'm alcoholic. My problems are not based upon people, place, and things. My problems are based upon my physical and mental relationship to alcohol. You see, if you change the people, place, and things in somebody's life like mine, all that happens is that I'm loaded with different people in different places, ruining different things. That's all that happens. By the time I was 17, almost 18, I barely scraped out of the public school system there in Seattle after getting kicked out of the private school system. My parents decided that Seattle was the problem, get them out of Seattle, things to get better, so they sent me 300 miles away to Washington State University. I spent 3 years at that university on my parents' money, and in that 3 years, I got approximately 10 credits. At any given time, my grade point average matched my blood alcohol content, about a 0.25. I did nothing at that school. By the time I was 22, this little story I'm about to tell you will let you know exactly where I stood with my family. Now, my father was Swedish, my mother was Icelandic. That's why I kind of look like a polar bear. And I don't know whether this custom I'm about to tell you about is a Scandinavian custom or whether it's a Lutheran custom. I don't know. But at Christmas time, my parents wouldn't just send out Christmas cards to their friends and relatives. My parents would send out this big, long Christmas letter that said everything the family had been doing that year. And when I was about 22, I got a hold of one of these letters that had been sent out the previous Christmas, and as I read it, it let me know exactly where I stood with my family. Now, the first paragraph talked about what my parents had been doing that year. Another impressive year, I'm sure. My parents were really had very impressive lives. I mean, there's a whole department named after my mother at the University of Washington. There's buildings across the world that are standing as a result of the work my father did. So I'm sure that paragraph was quite impressive. The next paragraph talked about what the Morris children had been doing that year, and that paragraph went something like this. Our oldest daughter, Christina, just graduated from Cornell University in Ithaca, New York, with a master's degree in human resources. She's now working for the Eli Lilly Pharmaceutical Company in the Midwest. She traveled to Europe this summer. She saw this, she saw that. Her hobbies are this, this, and this. She's a very happy young woman. We are very proud of her. Our oldest son, Eric, just graduated from Western Washington State University with a degree in marketing. He's now working for a large advertising firm here in downtown Seattle. He loves the golf. He loves to travel. He's engaged to be married to this wonderful woman named Mary Lou, who works for a very small company here in Seattle named Microsoft. It was small at one time. And they love to golf together. They love to travel together. He's a very happy young man. We are very proud of him. Our youngest son, Karl, just turned 22. Yep. Long story short, about the same time, really exactly the same time. What I'm about to describe to you, it condenses about 18 months to 2 years into one sentence, because it literally would take till breakfast to describe everything involved in this 18-month period. So I condensed it down to one sentence. A really bad night happened, so I joined the Navy. It was a bad night. It was a really bad night. What I'm about to tell you should concern you if you care anything about the security of the United States. But on my way into the Navy, I passed a potential test. It's called the ASVAB test. And this test that I took qualified me to become a nuclear engineer. That should concern you that the United States Navy would have any type of system in place that even maybe, possibly, or even remotely would allow somebody like me near anything nuclear. However, they made me take another test when I showed up at that base for boot camp, and I could not pass that particular test. That test is called a urinalysis test, is what it's called. I have another really strange reaction. I have another strange physical reaction to alcohol. It's not part of the self-diagnosis that the big book asks us to do. It's not part of that. But maybe you have this too, but it's another strange physical reaction to alcohol. Somewhere between the 5th and 6th drink, I become an instant cocaine addict. It's really a bizarre trick that happens, and boom, just like that. It's really strange. It's really strange. Anyway, should have been kicked out of the Navy for that UA, but through a series of events, and it's long story, I was allowed to stay in, but they took away that 2-year nuclear school that they were going to send me to, and they sent me directly out to the fleet, out on a Spruance-class destroyer, part of a squadron that's mission was to protect the 200-mile radius, and there's a 200-mile radius treaty that we would have with Russia, that none of their submarines could come within 200 miles of our coastline, and we couldn't come within 200 miles of theirs. And so my squadron would go up and down from all the way from Alaska to Central America. And I got to tell you, when I was when the ship was out at sea, I'm 23, I'm 24, I'm 25 years old at this point in my life. When the ship was out at sea, I started to understand what a young man should learn when he's in the military. I started to understand the camaraderie of being in the military, the honor of serving one's country. I started to learn a trade by God's sake. I started to learn something that maybe I could use later in my life. All the things that a young man should learn in the military. When my ship was out at sea, I was learning. However, that ship would invariably pull into a port, and I would leave that ship, and I would take a drink. And at this point in my life, when I take a drink, I would always trigger off a minimum of 2 days, sometimes a 3-day, every once in a while a 4-day drunk. And I got to tell you, when I'm in the middle of a 4-day drunk, but the ship is only in port for 2 days, we've got a math problem. And it's a very strange feeling coming out of one of these 3 or 4-day drunks and finding myself on a large pier at 6 a.m. in the morning in a foreign country. And I'm going, there was a destroyer here the other day. I'd been in the Navy approximately 2 years at this point, and I was already in a lot of trouble, and I came to on a Monday morning in a cheap motel room in downtown San Diego, and again the nightmare come to us Monday, and oh my God, I started drinking on Thursday, and I'm late again. Scrambled, and I jumped in my car and started racing back to get to the ship, and you know the old story, my car is dying of alcoholism right along with me, and I'm trying to get back to the ship, and at the front of every Navy base, there's a guard shack where a Marine stands duty. And under normal circumstances, you're supposed to slowly and politely pull your vehicle up to that guard shack. You will show that Marine your military ID. He will then look at the sticker on your front windshield, and if everything's in order, he'll allow you to proceed onto the base. This particular morning, I was also, as I was racing to get back to the ship, I was also exercising one of my other tools for living, is that I always knew that when I got to the ship, it's a while till I get a drink, so I'd always save a pint underneath my seat for the end of the drunk, and I'm trying to get that pint in me before I get to the base, and I'm paying more attention to that pint than where the car's going, and all of a sudden, my eyes came into focus, and I saw the guard shack was right in front of me, and the Marine had his head out of the guard shack like, and I'm wondering, what is he so excited about? Till I look down, I'm still going 40 miles an hour, and I'm literally about as far away as the front row here. And I tried to swerve, and the car glanced off this cement median on the right-hand side and flipped over right through that guard shack. And as I stand before you today, I am so very grateful that United States Marines are in tip-top physical shape. I mean, this guy did a quick dive out of there and a quick somersault. He's back up, weapon drawn. God, I hated these types of mornings. I really did. I just hated these types of mornings. You know, sirens going off, everybody's screaming and yelling and pointing at me like this is all my fault. And I'm climbing out of the car, and I've got questions too. I'm like, what happened, right? I really hated mornings like this. Stage 2 of mornings that I hated. About an hour later, I find myself in a hospital bed, and I'm handcuffed to the hospital bed. I really hated mornings like that, because I knew now I'm in legal trouble and medical trouble at the same time. And that morning, of course, my Navy superiors are reading new charges on me. This is nothing significant in my life. That's just what happens in a guy's life like mine. About every 90 days, if you're living the way I'm living, new charges. Just accept that. But the most significant thing that happened that morning is the Navy doctors prescribed this stuff called antabuse for me. And I was now under orders to show up at sick bay every single morning before quarters. And I'd have to show up before quarters, and I'd sit in a chair, and the hospital coroner would come over and he'd make me stick my tongue out like, and they'd put that little white pill on my tongue, and they'd make me sit there for a half an hour to make sure that antabuse actually got in my system. Over the next 7 to 10 days, I started to experience the most cunning, baffling, and powerful side of this thing we call alcoholism, and that is I had no alcohol in my system, and I'm slowly going insane. See, numerous times in my life, alcohol had been taken away from me in levels of severity. I mean, you know, as a teenager, friend overdoses, and the parents swoop in, and you gotta lay low, and you can't, right? And they, you know, when I flunked out of college, you know, people got involved and angry. Now the Navy is getting very angry and trying to take alcohol away from me. And common times throughout my life when people who loved me, cared about me, or who had authority over me would take alcohol away from me, they would at the same time put me in front of some well-meaning, highly educated people, like counselors, therapists, psychologists, psychiatrists, pastors, chaplains. At this point in my Navy career, I've got a weekly appointment with a Navy psychiatrist and a weekly appointment with a Navy chaplain. And throughout my life, these well-meaning people would always look at me, and they always wanted to talk to me about me. It'd be a one-on-one type situation, and they'd look at me, and they would all have their own version of saying, "What's the matter with you?" They would look at a report, and they'd say, "Why do you drink this way? What's the matter with you?" Now, if I would have had the vocabulary at that point in my life that you have given me here in Alcoholics Anonymous, I would have responded to these well-meaning people with something like this. I would have said, "I see that you're shocked by my drinking. I am too sometimes. Honestly, I really am. I am too." But I would have followed it up with this. "But if you knew how I felt when I wasn't drinking, you wouldn't be asking me why I drink. See, there's only one thing worse than the price I'm paying for my drinking, and that's the way that I feel when I'm not drinking." And I don't know how to verbalize that to them. I don't even know how to tell myself that. I lasted about 10 days on this antabuse, and I went AWOL from my ship. I locked myself in a hotel room in downtown San Diego, Plaza Hotel. It's on 4th and Broadway. It's actually still there. This would have been May of 1986. The reason I know the month and the year is there are police records from this time in my life. You know, it's documented. But in May of 1986, the Plaza Hotel cost $13 a night. The fine establishment. I checked just before COVID. They'd done a little rehabbing. It was $19 a night. I imagine due to recent inflation, it might be about $22 a night now. But check the Yelp reviews before you stay there. But I locked myself in that little hotel room and I had a bottle of vodka and a shot glass. And I remember sitting on the edge of the bed and on this rickety little end table in there, I had the bottle of vodka and the shot glass sitting there. And as I stared at the bottle of vodka, I remembered that the Navy doctors had given me a very stern warning about drinking on top of enemies. When they prescribed it for me, they had told me, son, you need to understand, you need to hear us. If you drink on top of the enemies, you will get one of two reactions. One reaction is you will get violently ill. The other reaction, son, is you might die. You could have complete and total organ shutdown. Do you hear us, son? I remember sitting there looking at that bottle, and those words rang in my ears, and I thought, well, wonder which reaction I'm going to get. And I took one shot. Nothing happened. Authority had lied to me again as far as I was concerned. I waited about 2 minutes just to make sure. And I took another shot. All of a sudden I felt tingly in the face, so I looked in this cracked little mirror that was in this hotel room, and it was bright red, blotchy and purple in places. Took another shot. All of a sudden I could feel my heart going boom, boom, boom. Looked at my shirt, I was drenched in sweat, and all of a sudden I was like, hyperventilating. We're doing all right so far. There's something wrong with you if you think this is funny, I gotta tell you. And I took another shot, and up it came. My second sponsor was a man named Eddie Cochran. His sobriety date was December 2nd, 1951. One of the pioneers of Southern California Alcoholics Anonymous. He called the next thing that happened to me projectile regurgitation. This is a new level of puking I am unfamiliar with. Because we all know normal puking, right? It's a tool for living out there. We all know how to be out there in the middle of a good drunk, and we get that little warning, sour taste in the back of our throat. Maybe a little bit comes up in the mouth. We kind of, and then we just come right back to the conversation. It's not the end of the night. It's not the end of the night, for God's sake. But here on the Anabuse, it was like this Linda Blair spray across the room. Thank God the Plaza Hotel is the type of hotel room where the toilet is in the same room with the bed. It's a design feature, I believe, maybe to make convicts feel more at home upon release. Back there, Allison? But I found the magic of drinking on top of Anabuse, that if you hang in there, and that's a very important feature. If you're going to drink on Anabuse, you cannot half measure it. In fact, if you're going to drink on top of Anabuse, you may need to reach down deep inside yourself for a level of commitment you might not even know you have. But I found that if I kept drinking and kept puking and kept drinking and kept puking for about an hour to an hour and a half, enough of the Anabuse would kick out of my system and I'd quit throwing up, and I would just be left with red face, hyperventilating and sweating, and I'm all right with it. So I drank on top of Anabuse the last 7 months of my drinking. The only words to describe this are desperation drinking. My second to my last drunk, I was left for dead in a motel parking lot in an area of San Diego called National City. That morning I came to on an operating table, and you know when you come to, you start looking around at your surroundings, and the purpose is to evaluate was it a good night or a bad night. And when you come to and you're on an operating table, it usually means it was a bad night. My last night of drinking, I'm being led out of the San Diego jail. I'm being transferred from the civilian authorities back to the military authorities. The handcuffs are extra tight that morning. Neck muscles are not working well. And you're being led around by your arm. And finally, after about an hour and a half in various different offices and different vehicles, they tried to bring me back to my ship. And that morning, as they tried to bring me to the quarterdeck of the ship, the officer deck put his arm up and said, "Wrong answer. Orders have been processed on this loser last night. The orders state 90 days in the brig, bad conduct discharge, or," and he got this sort of sour look on his face, "or it says here that he qualifies for treatment." And I remember when they said that, I went, Now, it wasn't because I thought treatment was a good idea. I didn't even really know what it was. I had heard of it. You can't really be in this world even past 1970 and not have heard of it. But this is how I would have heard of treatment or anything to do with recovery. I could be at a bar or a crack house, and somebody say, anybody seen Joe lately? And somebody say, oh, Joe got arrested last week. He had to go to treatment. We'd all go, oh, that was it. That was the sum total of interaction with any of that idea. There was no follow-up questions. There was no, hey, we ought to get a hold of Joe and see what he's doing. There was this, oh. Now, the reason that it piqued my interest that morning as I was there in handcuffs is that that treatment thing sounded like it might be able to help me with the inevitable court dates that were on the horizon. I was 25 years old. I'm obviously not too bright. You just heard the condition of my life. But I did know this. I knew that whenever I was in handcuffs, there were court dates on the horizon. And I thought, maybe this treatment thing might help me with those court dates. I now know that it would not have mattered what I was thinking or feeling that morning because I was in handcuffs. And I don't know about your experience in handcuffs, but my experience was always the same. Whoever had me in handcuffs, never once did they ever say, so what's your opinion on what we're going to do next? Right? When you're in handcuffs, you go where they say. And they just took me up to this military treatment center up in the north end of San Diego, and when the doors were locked behind me, that's when they took the handcuffs off me. And there is no better representation of who Karl Morris is out there in this world without Alcoholics Anonymous than that. The country I'm supposed to be serving and the society in which I'm supposed to be living in and contributing to is only willing to take the handcuffs off me when the doors are locked behind me, and rightfully so. So I've got to do this 45 days in this military treatment center. And I got to tell you, as far as I'm concerned, in the late 1980s, early 1990s, the United States Navy had one of the finest treatment centers in the world. It's not because they had some new fancy detox. It's not because they had any extra special counseling going on. I'm sure it was wonderful. The reason I think they were so amazing is because 4 to 5 nights a week, white vans would pull up to those barracks. About 5 or 6 white vans would pull up to those barracks. They would start calling off names and put 6 or 7 of us into each one of these vans. And each of those vans would leave that base and go out into San Diego County. Each one of those vans would show up at a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. So we would show up at meetings about this size right here, all over San Diego County. We would be 6 or 7 military men and women sitting along the back of these meetings. And I'm so very grateful that Alcoholics Anonymous allows and encourages outside agencies to refer potential alcoholics to open meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous and allows them to come in and watch Alcoholics Anonymous. That's what I did. I watched Alcoholics Anonymous. I didn't know there was a difference between watching Alcoholics Anonymous and actually doing Alcoholics Anonymous, but it saved my life, the fact that once again I'm in a situation, but it was different this time. Once again I was in a situation where alcohol had been taken away from me. This one seemed pretty serious. I mean, now I'm like under armed guard. A couple of the vans out of the 5 or 6 would have an armed guard with it because we were the ones that had a lot of charges on us. So we literally would be sitting along the back and there'd be an armed guard at the door. It was back when you could smoke in meetings and the armed guard would be at the door, leaning up and smoking, right? And he'd always put a jacket back so you could see his weapon. So we stayed in our seat. It was sort of some sort of strong sponsorship idea, I guess. But they actually did teach us at the treatment center that, hey, respect the meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. Stay in your seat, right, while the meeting's going on. Don't be going here. Because, you know, the knee-jerk reaction is, I got to go here, I got to do that, right? So I'm in a situation where alcohol has been taken away from me again. But this time, what's different is that instead of being put in front of these highly educated, well-meaning people for a one-on-one type conference, I wasn't put in front of them this time. I was put in front of you guys. And whereas those other people always wanted to talk to me about me, you guys had no interest in talking to me about me. You guys seemed to only want to talk about yourselves. That's all you would do, is go on and on and on about yourself, like I'm doing tonight, right? It's kind of like when Patrick gave me a call and said, hey, Carl, you want to come to Denver and talk about yourself for an hour? I said, yes. Yes, I will. If you are fairly new or not so new and the idea of being asked to do something like this, even if it's 10 minutes, is nerve-wracking for you, this is what I encourage you to do. Go practice telling your story in the mental institution. Really, they don't judge you. They don't. We do. They don't. And when you go in there and practice telling your story in the mental institution, if a guy on the couch, as you're telling your story, when you get to a certain point, a guy on the couch from mental institute goes, oh, that's great, man. Save that. Save that little piece of your story. Because if they like it in the mental institution, we're going to love it here in Alcoholics Anonymous. We're just going to love it. I'm kidding, but I'm not kidding. It's a great place to go. And they let you out. It's awesome. But anyway, so that's the first thing that I noticed. The second thing that I noticed is you guys seemed really, really happy about being sober. That was absolutely foreign to me. Because I knew what sober was. Sober was, hey, Carl, you're not drinking. What's up? I can't. I got arrested. I can't drink. That's sober. But you guys seem to be completely at ease about it, excited about it, like really happy about being, and not only were you happy about you being sober, you would lose your mind over your friend being sober. Right? When they get up to the 90 days, oh my God! That really caught my attention. It really did. Then you just like would drop these little one-liners on me, right? You'd say something like, you know, my mind would have killed my body a long time ago, except it needed it for transportation. Whoa. And then, you know, I remember I was like on my third meeting, somebody said, hey, if you're new, hear this. If you don't take the first drink, you can't get drunk. I've always fancied myself as I can always find the loophole in everything. Whatever you say, I think I can find the loophole. But I remember getting hit with that one. If you don't take the first drink, you can't get drunk. I was like, there's no loophole to that. There's really no loophole to that. I was like, whoa. Right? So later that night, you might find me at the barracks. I'd be outside, back at the treatment center, be smoking outside, and somebody come up and say, so what are you doing, Carl? Well, I'm not taking the first drink because I can't get drunk then. Holy smokes, right? I think I stayed sober for like 3 days just thinking about that. And in that 3 days, hey, if you're new and you have people that are not alcoholic that still love you, don't try to impress them with what you're learning in Alcoholics Anonymous. The day after I had learned that, and I was like thinking, oh my God, don't take the first drink, I can't. The company commander inside the treatment said, hey guys, if you haven't called your mother, you got to call them right now and let them know you're in treatment. Like, pointed at the bank of payphones, and I went over there and I called my mom. Mom, Navy threw me into treatment. She goes, oh, thank God. Right? It wasn't like, there was no, oh, why? What? Right? Oh, thank God. Right? And I said, they're sending me to these AA meetings, and you wouldn't believe what they told me. Mom, they said, if I don't take the first drink, I can't get drunk. There was silence on the other end of that line. After about 10 seconds, she said, a bunch of philosophers there in that AA. But to me, it was life-changing news. Now, of course, I learned, and you stay here longer, there's a whole lot more to it than just that. Right? But man, when I was new, that was like some really solid information. After 45 days, I got let out of that military treatment center and got let out on a Friday afternoon. And my car was in this impound lot that they brought. And as I was leaving that base, in chapter 5, when they read, we stood at the turning point. I got to tell you, my 38 years of sobriety, I've stood at the turning point under many, many conditions. When I'm talking about the turning point in my life, it means when I look back on certain situations, I can see that if I would have turned right, my life would have gone that way. If I would have turned left, it would have gone that way. I mean, literally, split-second decisions when I look back. Right? I've been at a turning point in many conditions. And the very first one that I faced sober was when I was leaving that base because I had orders in my hands that said, it was a Friday afternoon, and my orders said I did not need to be back to my ship until Monday. Don't ask me what Navy clerk did that, right? I send him to treatment at the taxpayer's expense and then give him the weekend off. military treatment center was at the Miramar Naval Air Station. That's where Top Gun Pilot School was. Our little section was called Top Drunk, is what they called us. But if you know where that Miramar Naval Air Station is, it's right near the 15 freeway. And it's right where the 163 freeway meets the 15, and that 163 freeway would take you right downtown within blocks of the Plaza Hotel. And I remember leaving that base, pulling off that base, and this thought process was, if I take a right, I can head right back downtown, and I can go right back where I left. But if I take a left, I remember this one place where the AA meetings were, and that place seemed to have, people made reference that there were other meetings during the day, that they kept on making reference they had been at a noon meeting earlier that day, or they're going to tomorrow's night's meeting, and they're referring to the same location. And I remember where that is because it's just a couple of blocks from a bar I used to like to drink at. If I go there, maybe I can find those people in AA. And I took a left, and I showed up at the 6 o'clock gong show meeting in Pacific Beach. And I remember pulling in, and it was like 45 minutes before the meeting started, and I could see the meeting started to bustle just like this one, little people start showing up, and I'm sitting in the back. And one guy that night, operating on his primary purpose, I'm sure there were many other people that were operating on their primary purpose, but this guy was especially intent on working his primary purpose that night. He caught, apparently I caught his eye somehow, and he came barreling across the meeting, and he rather aggressively said, "Hey, never seen you before, what you doing?" And he startled me, and I accidentally told him the truth. I said, I don't know, I just got out of a Navy treatment center about an hour ago, and I don't know what I'm doing. This guy's eyes went bing, big smile went across his face. He looked like he had just hit the jackpot in Las Vegas. See, I had no idea that I had just established myself as the holy grail of Alcoholics Anonymous. A new guy who accidentally admits he does not know what he's doing. Right? So at the break, this guy is like fighting his friends off. Yeah, I got this guy. He is mine. I got him. Right. Now, I didn't know it, but there was something going on in this guy's life that particular Friday night that made him especially glad to meet me. This guy's girlfriend had left him the night before for one of his friends in his home group. So I know. So he was wondering what he was going to do with his weekend: homicide, suicide, get loaded, or grab this newcomer. He's like all over me all weekend. We went to like 18 meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous. And this guy was insane over this woman, flat out insane. In between this barrage of meetings he dragged me to, in between each meeting, he'd throw in the passenger side of his car. He'd start driving and he'd start yelling at me. It's like he wouldn't even look at the road. He had like one of those AA radar cards that just made it to the next meeting, I guess. And he'd be yelling at me, "You gotta go to meetings, you gotta read the book, you gotta get a sponsor. Damn her! You gotta go to meetings, you gotta read the book. Damn her!" Now I didn't know it, but I was getting a very early introduction to your typical AA relationship breakup is what I was getting. But I'm so very glad that guy, that night, in his pain, was a guy in Alcoholics Anonymous who had done the work of Alcoholics Anonymous, who had taken the steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, and therefore, he understood that the solution to his pain was out of self, out of self, out of self. I'm so glad that guy, that night, in his pain, was not at home underneath his covers, whining into his sponsor's answer machine. If you're younger than 25 years old, an answer machine is this box that used to sit on the kitchen counter. So glad he was not whining, under his covers, going, "Sponsor, where are you? Fix me!" I was so glad he was out dragging my sorry butt around. And by being dragged to so many meetings in the same area of town by this guy, I learned something really valuable about how we go to meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous, especially when we're new. See, I saw other people that were at multiple meetings over that weekend. Now, I didn't see anybody else doing 18 meetings, just me and that guy. But I saw other people that were at 2 or 3 meetings over that weekend. And what I learned about how we go to meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous, especially when we're new, I'm going to correlate what I learned to a football game. Now, a football team is out there on the field for one reason, and one reason only: to win the game. And how do they win that game? They will huddle up, they will make a plan, and they'll do one play. Then they will huddle up again, They'll make another plan, and they'll do one play. That's exactly what we do here in Alcoholics Anonymous. And the game around here is one day without a drink, you're a big winner. And how do we do that? One day. We run in here and we huddle up. And we go, remember, we're bodily and mentally different from our fellows. Right! And we go out there and we try a little of this and we try a little of that and we run right back in here. After that weekend, I got back to my ship and the one other sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous was waiting for me. His name was Bob W. He was 23 years old. He had 14 months of sobriety. I was 25 years old. When I got back to my ship, I had 48 days of sobriety. Bob W. was very proud of his name. He would say, I'm like the hybrid of the founders of Alcoholics Anonymous. If there was such a thing as a rolling eye emoji, we all would have done, oh, geez, Bob. Right? But his sponsor, a guy in court, had been hounding him for months that he needed to start working with others. He kept on feeling like he was inadequate. He didn't have nothing, right? But now, here I am being brought back to the ship, and I was like gold being delivered to him on a silver platter. I was going to have to jump overboard to get away from this guy. He was on fire, and he was going to carry the message. So my first 2 years of sobriety were spent on that ship, traveling the world, and whenever the ship would pull into a port, Bob and I would go and find you guys, no matter what city, what country we were in. And I'm going to sound like your grandfather when you ask for a ride to school. He says, I walked to school uphill both ways, 10 miles in snow. You don't need a ride. That's what I'm going to sound like when I say what I'm going to say. When we had to hunt for meetings in other countries, there was no social media. There was no internet. There was no meeting apps. We had to get off that ship. We'd have to go find a payphone. We would have to drop whatever currency there was or a calling card. We'd have to dial a number. Maybe a live person would answer. Maybe a recording. They would give us an address. We would have to use a map, an actual map, and actually go find that address. And you guys were always there. Whether there was 2 of you or there were 200 of you, you guys were always there. So when the ship was out at sea, though, we'd be out at sea for weeks at a time. Again, the grand sponsor got involved and told Bob that he and I had to read the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous every single night when we were out at sea. So Bob and I, every night at 6:30 p.m., when the ship would be out at sea for 2 and 3 weeks at a time, we would meet in engine room number 2 down at this little battery shop. This battery shop was like 12 feet by 12 feet. And we would sit in there every night at 6:30. We would read the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous back and forth. I'm the first one that Bob really worked with. He didn't know what he was doing. I certainly didn't know what I was doing. And in my mind's eye, when I picture those 2 young men out in the middle of the Pacific Ocean on the USS Cushing, down in that little battery shop and the bowels of that ship in the engine room number 2, and I picture those 2 young men reading the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, I view it as kind of Alcoholics Anonymous in its purest form. The blind leading the blind. Neither one of us knew what we were doing. But we both had a willingness to stay sober. We had a big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. We had access to the fellowship when we could. And it was enough. Because that's whatever there is, it's enough. Do you guys get all excited when somebody in your home group gets 1 year? Like people go out to dinner, your friends show up, and you do cakes and stuff like we do in Southern California and sing very badly and all that. But it's a big, big deal, right? My 1 year was in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, January 21st, 1988. And Bob went up to the mess deck and stole a piece of stale cornbread. And there was no candles on the ship, so he flicked a wood match, poof, popped it in there, and he sang really bad. Happy birthday to you. It was so lame. It was just the lamest 1 year you've ever seen. Just. Gotta tell you though, later that night, in my rack, in the middle of the ocean, I didn't know it at the time, but in looking back, it was a spiritual experience. Because what I realized that night was, I really have 1 year without a drink. I really, really have. I really have 1 year. What I'm representing to the world is really the truth, at least in this. It was the first time in a long time that what I was telling you was actually the truth. I really had 1 year. Then I also had this other feeling that night was, maybe I can get what those people are talking about at Alcoholics Anonymous. Maybe I can have a life that might mean something. Maybe I might have a life that has some purpose. Maybe I could be part of my community. Maybe I could actually feel like I'm part of a community. I had never felt that. I'd never felt like there was any meaning or purpose or community in my life. And I remember that night thinking, maybe I can get that. It was also during this period of time in my second year of sobriety that I learned the fundamental beauty of Alcoholics Anonymous, and that is one alcoholic can affect another alcoholic like no one else can. That's what makes us different than any other spiritual movement that's ever hit the planet. And when you break everything away from Alcoholics Anonymous, it's really one alcoholic can affect another alcoholic like no one else can. And how I learned that, I told you that whenever the ship would pull into port, Bob and I would go out and find meetings. But also, if we were going to be in port for more than a day or two, Bob and I would also split a hotel room to get off the ship if neither one of us had duty. So this particular time, we're in Victoria, British Columbia on Vancouver Island. And we got off the ship, we got a hotel room, and then we ran off to go to the meeting hall that night. We were out with the AAers, and after the meeting, Bob said, hey, Karl, I'm not feeling very well. I think I'm going to head back to the hotel room. And I don't want to go back yet. I hung out with the AAers some more, maybe went to another meeting, maybe went and got something to eat, maybe flirted with a girl, probably all three, right? I'm out, and about an hour and a half, 2 hours later, I come back to the hotel room, and Bob has found another guy from our ship that was on the street named Blair, and Blair's like, he's got vomit down the front of his shirt, he'd hit his head, there's blood, dried blood trickling down the side of his head, and he's like, and Bob has him on my bed, right, in the hotel room. He's on my bed. Right? He's got him propped up against the headboard with an end table and a chair and a pillow, and Blair's like, and Bob is there reading the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. That's what I see when I open up the door. I go, this is ridiculous. Blair doesn't even know where he's at. What do you know? But I threw my 10 cents in, and then we carried Blair back to the ship, made sure he got into his rack safely. And so last we hear of Blair for weeks. Thinks it's a big waste of time, but we got him back safely. We don't see Blair for weeks. He's hiding from us. He's dodging us on the ship. And we learned we don't chase people down. Weeks later, we're back in port in San Diego. And I'm in my rack. It's about 2 in the morning. I'm sleeping. And all of a sudden, Karl, wake up. And I pull my curtain back. And there's Bob. Bob says, get up. Blair's on the Coronado Bridge. We got to go get him. Apparently, you guys don't know San Diego very well. The Coronado Bridge used to be such a popular suicide spot that they actually had, about every 100 yards, they had a suicide hotline, right? In case you change your mind when you climb up there. And apparently Blair had climbed up there, and he had picked up that suicide hotline phone at the top of the Coronado Bridge. And this is apparently what Blair had been telling the suicide hotline counselor. Blair was saying, I will only talk to Bob W. So she said, who's Bob W? And Blair said, it's anonymous. So she goes and gets her boss, and they start doing the good cop, bad cop, firing questions at him to confuse him, right, perfectly, to get information out of him. So they find out he's from the Navy and what ship he's from. So they just take a stab in the dark, and they call down to the quarterdeck of our ship, and they suicide hotline people to the quarterdeck of our ship. Is there a Bob W on that ship? Now, my first sponsor, Bob, he would guard your anonymity at the level of that ship, but he never guarded his own, so he could be of service at any time. So the guy who answered the phone at 2 a.m., yeah, Mr. 12 Steps, we know all about him. So they went and got Bob. Bob comes and gets me, and I get out of the rack, and we get into Bob's car. We start driving down to the Coronado Bridge, and Bob looks over at me and says, Karl, get the big book out of the glove box, bone up on working with others. Like, all right. And he looks and he goes, oh, forget it, we're going to wing it tonight. And we get down to the base of the Coronado Bridge, and everything that San Diego County has available for a situation like this is there. They have a staging area whenever one of these situations going on, and that staging area, the fire department is there, the police department is there, the on-duty psychologist is there, specifically for suicide situations. And they've got, everything rigged so they can talk to him. And Bob and I are led through this gate, and we start walking across this area, and as we walk up, one of the firemen, who seems to be in charge, looks over at us and goes, is one of you Bob W? And Bob goes, no, that's me. And he goes, I don't know what you're going to do. We've been talking for an hour and a half. You ain't budging, but here, give it a shot. Gives him this little speakerphone contraption, and Bob grabs it and goes, Blair? And you can hear on the other end, Bob, is that you? And Bob said, yes, Blair, it's me. Now get the hell down from that bridge. And you go, okay. One alcoholic can affect another alcoholic like no one else can. Don't forget that. We don't have the right to get what we find here in Alcoholics Anonymous and then go wander off in our own lives. Because only we can help us. We have a responsibility to take our seat in meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous to be of service, like they were there for me when I got here. Oh, I gotta just throw this in. I've only been able to say this the last few years. Because of the pandemic and everybody went on to Zoom. But when we came out, my home group was a Sunday night speaker meeting. We got a few hundred people in the room. We got about another 90 people that stayed with us from Zoom. So we hooked up hybrid. So we got big screen TVs like that in our room. And so we got the Zoom people. And whenever it's Christmas time and it lands too close to Christmas, I heard a lot of the speakers, they don't like to, we don't like to bother somebody to leave their family around Christmas. So they assign me that I have to talk whenever that time of year. And this one, so I've been telling this story about Blair for 3 decades. But because we have that in the room, I was able to have a really fun time with my group where I got to tell the Blair on the bridge story. And then I got to say to my home group, I'd really like you all to meet somebody. And up there, hi, my name's Blair, I'm an alcoholic. It was so much fun, so much fun. Anyway, 2 years sober, got an honorable discharge out of the Navy. That is the result of the steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, an apparently merciful God, and a Navy clerk that lost half my file. That's how that happened. One of the amends I was in, I gotta stop here in about 2 minutes. All right, I guess I'm gonna stop in 2 minutes. One of the amends I was unable to make when I was still in the Navy was that my parents had paid for the bachelor's degree, right? They paid for Washington State University, Seattle U, University of Washington. I got nothing. And Bob did not know what to do about that. But his sponsor got involved. It's never good news when the grand sponsor gets involved in these types of situations. And he said, Carl, you got 2 choices. You either have to go get what they paid for or pay them back every single nickel they wasted on it. So I immediately looked into VA benefits, and I found a university in this little town called Covina. And I puttered on up to up the LA freeways with everything I owned in my car. 2 years sober, 27 years old now, and I decided, I'll find out where the meeting hall is, just so I can go to a meeting when I need to, because I'm going to be real busy going to school, and I got to work, got to be self-supporting, but I want to see where the meetings are. And so I pulled into this noon meeting at the Covina group, and man making coffee that day saw me, realized he didn't know who I was, and he said the very same thing that guy said when they're fresh out of the Navy, but he wasn't aggressive, because this was Eddie Cochran. He was 50, at that point he had 37 years of sobriety, and he said, never seen you before, son, what you doing? This time I had a much better answer. I said, sir, it's very nice to see your meeting hall here. I'm 2 years sober, I'm fresh out of the Navy. I'll be stopping by when I get a chance, but I'm going to be real busy. I got to go to school, got to work, need a life, I got to get a life. I've heard people talk about having lives in AA. I need one of those, so I'm going to be real busy. And Eddie had this little laugh that was sort of and he gave me the Gettysburg Address of Alcoholics Anonymous. He said, oh, son, school and work, wonderful things to do in between meetings. What he was really telling me is the following. What he was really telling me, son, your life depends on you learning how to live in Alcoholics Anonymous and visit the world. Please, son, do not try to hash it out there in the real world and only visit us when convenient. And he wasn't talking about real world of, go to the morning meeting, the noon meeting, no, he's talking about a spiritual centeredness of knowing who and what I am. That's the very first thing I told you when I got up here to the podium. There's a lot of things I care about in this world, that I have a lot of passion for, that I spend time paying attention to, but there's nothing more important than the fact that I'm an alcoholic. Let me end it with this real quick story. I was asked to do what I'm doing tonight in 1998 down in Nogales, Arizona. I called my mother. I said, Mom, if you try to page me, before cell phones, when you had pagers, right? If you try to page me, I don't answer. Please don't get worried. I'm going to be in Nogales. She said, oh, you need to get a hold of Don and Leona. They just live 20 miles. They'd love to see you. And I, huh? Who? She goes, oh, you haven't seen him since you were 9 years old. But Don was the best man at your father's and my wedding. And lifelong. Oh, yes, of course, of course. So I called up Don and I said, Don, this is Karl Morris. I'm going to be just south of you this weekend. Maybe I can come up and go to coffee or a meal. He said, oh, bring your golf clubs. I know you love to golf. I'm like, that's weird that he knows that. I haven't seen him since I was 9. It's true, I'm like a golf whore. I'll golf with anybody at any time. I brought my clubs. I left the conference on Saturday morning, went up and met him at his golf course. We sort of walk along as we're playing. He's asked me all these very specific, pertinent questions about my life. He knew what school I graduated from, what my degree was in, the fact that I worked with General Electric for years, that I sit on the board of directors of this organization. And he just knew all about my life there in 1998. And the fourth was like, oh, Don, I'm like baffled. How do you know? I haven't seen him since I was 9. How on earth do you know that? He goes, oh, that is so easy. I get the Christmas letter every year. Yes!